Hello, my terrific third graders. This is Mrs. Rowley with this week's topic of discussion. So, the weather was great this weekend, and I hope you got to go outside like I did. On Saturday, my husband and I had a fire all day long. This is the fire that we had. It was dark at that time, but we burnt all day long wood around the property. And that's a picture of my husband and I really enjoying ourselves outside. So I hope you had as much fun as I did. And I hope that you are ready to have a fantastic week. So, this is a great time for your teacher to hand out your old tickets and your new tickets. Let's look at your old tickets first and look at your work, the work that you did, and the answers that you wrote down. And then we'll go into this week's topic of discussion. So I do apologize because last week I just messed third grade folders up so much. I put in the wrong vocabulary word, and then I got Mrs. Elliott's and Mrs. Todd's tickets mixed up, and it was a mess. So I think I did much better this week. The vocabulary word that you answered, because it was on the video, was the time between noon and midnight. And if you answered PM, you're absolutely right. So PM, if you don't know, actually means something. It isn't just letters. It's Latin for post meridian, and that means after midday. So you can go home today and tell your parents that you learned Latin in school. Ooh, very exciting. PM happens at lunchtime when it turns 12 o'clock. It is after midday, and therefore PM is in effect all the way until 12 hours later at 12 o'clock in the morning, or AM comes into play then. So good job with those for those of you who knew that word. That was a tough one. Tough one. The question of the week last week interests me. It stated there are 254 counties in Texas. What is that number rounded to the nearest 10, and what is that number rounded to the nearest 100? And I would say that most students remembered the rhyme that was taught to them when it comes to rounding. And the rhyme goes, 5 or more, raise the score, 4 or less, let it rest. And that is a clever little rhyme to remember that. But what you didn't tell me in your answers, you weren't very specific about what is happening. Like, it's a clever little rhyme, and I like it. I think it's very useful to remember what you're doing, but you weren't very clear to me with how it is that you round, or what numbers you were looking at when you round. So I want you to keep in mind that when you're rounding, you're actually telling somebody what is the closest number to the number that we're talking about. So, for example, we have a number line, which I know everyone loves number lines. And the first number line shows 250 through 260. And what I'm trying to show you is when you are rounding to the nearest 10, I think most of you recognize that the 5 was in the tens place. So you have a choice. And what you're being asked when you round is, what is 254 closer to? Is it closer to 250, or is it closer to 260? And so then you use that rhyme to tell you which it's closer to. So let's look and see. Here's 254 on our number line. If we see how many hops or how many spaces or how many numbers it is to 250, we're going to compare that to see how many spaces, hops, or numbers it is to 260. So from 254, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 numbers. There are 4 numbers between 250 and 254. Okay, perfect. Now let's see on the other end. Starting at 254, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I know that if I were to round to the nearest 10, 254 is closer to 250 than it is to 260. So 250 was the correct answer when you're rounding to the nearest 10. Well, then you're asked to round to the nearest 100. So here's a new number line that shows 200 on one end and 300 on the other. And my number is right about there on my number line. So now I'm going to ask you to look at this diagram, and without thinking about the rhyme, how can you tell which 100 my number is closer to? And I'm going to give you a hint. 250 is the halfway mark. So do you think 254 is closer to 300, or do you think it's closer to 200? Turn to your neighbor and talk about that. And how do you know? I'm going to give you a second for that. Where is it closer to? If you said it was closer to 300, or it rounds to 300, you're absolutely right. It is closer to 300. So when you have 254, you would round up to 300 because it's closer to 300 than it is to 200. So nice job with last week's topic of discussion. You guys remembered that rhyme really well. Just remember that you're looking for the number it's closest to, whether it's the closest 10 or the closest 100 or the closest 1,000. And the rhyme is very useful in helping you find that out. All right, let's look at this week's topic of discussion. Your ticket should look like this. Remember, third graders, to write your name on your ticket. I've had lots of kids not be able to get points because they didn't write their names on their tickets, and that's silly because there have been a lot of good stuff coming. There's lots of good stuff coming in. And also, I want you to know that if you're curious about the amount of points that your class has, you need to look at the bulletin board across from the copier by the office, because I'm going to post how many points you guys have there. Now, Mrs. Todd's class, you've already had one reward, so now you're working towards 200 to get your second reward. And Mrs. Elliott's class, you guys hit 100 points, so you're going to be on your first reward too. So think about what it is that you'd like. All right, let's look at the vocab. Vocab this week is a mark used to record data. What kind of a mark do you use to do that? Turn to a friend, talk about it if you don't know, and if you do know, tell people what you think. Don't forget to write your name on your paper. All right, when you think you know what the vocabulary word is, write the answer on the vocabulary side of your answer ticket. A mark used to record data. Somebody knows. I know. All right, let's look at the problem. I'm psyched about this problem because I picked these problems out way in advance, and I think this is a perfect question for third graders for where you're at. There are 40 relatives at a party. There are 5 tables that each seat the same number of people. How many people can sit at each table? We have been working hard in both classrooms to draw pictures to help solve problems. This is a perfect opportunity for you to draw a picture to solve this problem. I'm confident that most kids are going to get this one right. So remember, on that blank piece of paper that's stapled to your answer ticket, show me how you got your answer. And this is a perfect opportunity to practice those strategies we've worked on this year. Make sure that when you get an answer, you talk to a friend about the answer that you got. See if you have the same strategy. See if you can understand their strategy. If you have questions about their strategy, ask. And be a clear and effective communicator if they have a question about your strategy. Once you've written down your vocabulary word, and once you have an answer for this week's topic of discussion, and once you've shown me how you've gotten your answer, and you've checked in with friends, and you've had some good conversation about it, you can give the ticket to your teacher. She'll give it to me, and I'll get back to you. All right, have a great week, guys, and I will see you next week for topic of discussion.